Hello there, you are listening to a very special episode of the Nearly Men Video Games Podcast. This is a very special spoiler cast for The Last of Us 2. This is a major warning. If you do not want to know anything about Last of Us 2, if you've not played it, go away, play it, come back, and then you can listen to this podcast, but there will be major spoilers for this episode, so please do not listen if you have not finished The Last of Us 2. I've warned them. I've warned them. I can't speak, but I've warned them.
Spoilers!
Yes. Welcome.
It says it up there, it's a spoiler cast. I'm not telling you again. It's a spoiler cast. We're going to talk about everything.
Those of you who have not played the game, this is your last warning because Joel dies.
It's a spoiler cast.
Joel dies.
What?
And more specifically, he is horribly murdered. Right, there we go. That was like ripping off a Band-Aid.
That's it. That's the cast. We're done.
That was the.
That was hellish.
Okay, so Gary.
Yeah.
Who finished the game first? Was it me or was it you? We both finished about the same time. I can't quite remember.
I think I finished it first, and you finished it the Saturday, because I finished it Friday into the Saturday.
You finished it like 2 a.m. or something, didn't you?
Yeah, me and Daybreak right to the bitter end. Me and Daybreak right through the awkward scene, so I was like being a parent.
We'll get to that. We'll almost certainly get to that. So we finished it a while back now, a few weeks ago. Paolo has literally just finished it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm thinking is let's have a quick let's sort of touch base with Paolo and what he's thinking just now. You and I have had a little bit more time to sort of let it marinate. Paolo, what's your sort of gut response right now?
Just a kind of skimming across it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a phenomenal game. It is no matter what you think of how the story goes or what happens or the tone of it, it is a phenomenal piece of storytelling. It's made by people who are at the top of their game, and they are being pushed to be better than they've ever been. And it's I don't want to say it's fun. It's not a fun game, but it's very. It's very creatively satisfying. Even if you don't like what it is, like the story, like where it went or like where it goes, I think it's very well written, it's very well executed, and to me, as I said on the normal podcast, it's all about the story for me. The combat's superfluous to it. So I think I went in with it to be told a very good story and a continuation of the first game, and I think it achieved that for me.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gary, what if we were to get you to sort of dip your toe in the water as now? What are your sort of feelings?
Like, I was satisfied with the game, rather than most of the game. Like, mechanically, it was a good game. It played well, and I took the first game and built in it, which was nice. And I never went too far out there. And it was just like adding in random stuff. It felt natural progression. The story for me, it was a captivating story, and it held my attention, and I wanted to go further. For me, it fell apart at times.
Okay.
And we'll talk about this more later, but I feel like it was 3 games squished into one.
Okay.
And part of me wishes it was the 3 separate games rather than the 3 games in one. And the ending left me hollow. And I don't quite know if I wanted to feel that way, but then maybe that's what they're going for. But I've just felt a bit like, oh.
So if I can jump in there, I think that was by design. This was never going to be a happy a happy ending. And I know you're not necessarily saying that you were looking for a happy ending, but I think they were deliberately looking for you to sort of feel hollow, because it was a shit sandwich basically.
The world's a shit sandwich, but
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? There was a point I just was like, it's just a bit much. I get to the point for me, it was unbelievable for that all to be happening to that one person.
Well, I suppose. Do you mean Ellie? That one person?
Well, Ellie and Abby to an extent, but like that whole.
But
The end felt very confused to me, and it just I was a bit like.
I mean,
does it really work?
I have to say, I didn't get any of that. I thought the game was beautiful. I thought it was brutal. I thought it was bleak and attritional and aspirational at points, but at the same time, this sort of grounded experience. This was the same thing we had the other night on Deliver Us the Moon. I saw various folks spitting the dummy about the fact it wasn't a happy ending. I don't want a happy ending. I don't care about a happy. I want an ending, and I like something that leaves you questioning, leaves you thinking, and the overall feeling of the Last of Us Part 2, I think for me, is the fact that it basically is an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind, and what you sort of happened at the end was everyone was left like half blind, you know. I just thought it was an incredibly bold piece of storytelling. I think it was probably a little bit too long.
I'd agree.
There were some points in it where I think they could have moved it on a bit, and there's a couple of points where I think they could have stretched it out a little bit. But I mean, this is nitpicking. This is nitpicking on a franchise and a game that we all cared an awful lot about, and everyone cared a lot about. And I ended up tweeting about it, saying just what a game it was. And I said, it was when Laura Bailey was getting all her grief. And I said that The Last of Us 2 may not have been the story I wanted as such. It's probably not. If I could have written my dream storyline of The Last of Us, it probably wouldn't have been that. But I'm so glad that it wasn't, because and Neil Druckmann said this, respect for your fans means you should never pander. And Naughty Dog are the kind of team, I mean, maybe on the, with Uncharted or something, they're a bit more likely to go through the tropes, because it's more of an Indiana Jones sort of fairy tale sort of thing. The Last of Us is bold. Even the original one was bold in the ending. So they were always going to make these difficult choices. They were always going to make bold choices. And I think the fact that we all have a similar sort of feeling at the end is quite a good thing. I think that's a great thing. The longer I think about the game now, I had almost this sort of like PTSD, and I say that lightly, and I don't mean to diminish our genuinely real serious illness, but I had that sort of moment when I was like, I keep swearing, we'll need to edit this. Sorry, Paolo.
Have you sworn more than once? I've missed the first one.
That's twice. I mentioned the sandwich. Apologies.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's an 18+ game, so I don't think any kids are going to be listening to it.
We're a family-friendly podcast, though.
It's the podcast. I'll try to behave myself now.
Son of a gun.
It's always the spoiler cast, I swear, and I swore on the on the Detroit one as well.
I've no paper. I'll need to type it.
Yeah, I just thought it was incredibly bold, and yeah, there's some things I might have done better with my heart of hearts, or but I'm glad they made the choices that they did, and I'm happy more or less with it, and I genuinely think the game's a masterpiece. There are little bits that maybe are a wee bit there. Right, so I mentioned it. I sort of put it in a joke, but I think we need to talk straight away about the death of Joel. This is the big moment. I don't know if this was the moment, because we managed to avoid the leaks, but I think this might have had something to do with the leak.
I think Naughty Dog did a brilliant job of completely trolling us with the trailers.
Yeah, with Dinah's
Aye.
wait
I
till
mean,
all
I know, Gary, you weren't
Really? I knew it was coming a mile away. It was so obvious.
But
not Joel's death. No, we're talking.
No,
about
I think it was. I thought, like, from what you guys spoke about trailers, I was like, if he doesn't die, it's not this. Like, I just thought it was for the get go. I thought it was a very obvious thing that was going to happen.
So
I
did
was
I.
even shocked when it.
So did I, but not then, because they did a brilliant one, and I caught it, and I was like, that's a brilliant piece of trailer making. Because if you remember when Ellie's in, I think it's Hillcrest or something, when she meets Jesse, and it's in an alley, and he taps her on the shoulder. In the trailer, they'd cut it. Yeah, that one. Yeah, they'd cut it that it looked like Joel.
Mm-hmm.
So you thought that Joel would be in the game
longer.
So when that happened so soon, that's what flipped it. If you know what I mean.
Maybe by not watching it, I just felt it was going to happen at the start. Maybe that's the double, because I had avoided it all. I was like, logically, it's going to happen at the start, and there was just no adventure.
I think the other thing was, I did think Joel was going to die at some point. What I didn't know was, and I think what they did, Bryce, was the way that he died.
Yes.
The execution of it was what got me.
He didn't die a hero. It was a horrible, brutal murder.
And then he gets spat on. Oh.
Well, I think it was probably his least of his worries, to be honest. But the way, we're used to Joel being the hero. Joel saved the day. Joel saved Ellie in the first game. Joel saves Abby. And then you sort of expected him to, be killed, running headfirst into a bloater with some dynamite or something. You sort of anticipated, and that's why it's almost as though all the hate the game's got, if he died that sort of way, then maybe all the incels wouldn't have been so annoyed, but they were so annoyed because a woman killed him in particular. It was a gut punch. It was an absolute gut punch when it happened.
It was absolutely brutal.
Horrifically done, and the whole cinematics around it, and of course we are going to talk about this, but the fact that you play as Abby beforehand as well, they make you play. It's a very cruel thing that they make you play as Abby beforehand, and then obviously Joel saves her life, and then she kills. And I think by that point I had already kind of picked up what Abby was here to do, and I was fairly sure it was about Joel. We didn't know the exact specifics by that point in the game, but I kind of knew she was there. But you're sort of sitting there going, oh maybe because he saved her life, she'll be conflicted. She wasn't conflicted.
I would just like to. Right? Can I tell a bit of story here about how? Yeah. So Abby is the daughter of the doctor who was going to operate on Ellie.
Yeah. The only one in the world who is a qualified surgeon, apparently.
I would just like to add, and you can go away and check on my playthrough.
I know what you're going to say.
I shot that man in the knee.
Yeah, and he died from that gunshot.
I saw you do that. Right?
He should still be alive. Therefore, Last of Us 2 does not exist.
He probably died of an infection. You shot his kneecap off now.
And he's the only surgeon who knows how medicine works, Paul.
Well, I think more specifically, it was some sort of neuroscientist.
Neurosurgeon, yes.
I think there was a slightly different kettle of fish.
Which I'm going to talk about how it doesn't actually work out, but we'll come back to that shenanigans.
Yeah, she is. So the doctor who's going to operate on Ellie is the father of Abby. Abby is growing up in a Fireflies community, and the game jumps back and forth because you play as Abby at the start of the game, and it's kind of really weird because when she first wakes up, I had no idea you played as anyone other than Ellie in the game, apart from the little bit you play as Joel at the start. Well, I didn't even know that. That was a nice wee surprise. I'm
still not over it.
But
really,
so I had played a bit of it before Gary had, and then I jumped into the first maybe 45 minutes of Gary's stream when he played it, and Gary had the same moment as me where Abby wakes up and you're like, who's she? She's not Ellie. Wait, am I controlling her? What? And then you've got, look at her arms, bloody hell.
At one point I went, is that Ellie? She's got really buff. Wait, her face looks different. I was like, I don't know what's happening.
And I just thought it was a really nice way of doing it. And then, so I sort of thought, oh, it's a really interesting thing to play as the baddie for a little bit. And then that thing happens, and now we're going to be Ellie, and now we're going after her. But the game doesn't necessarily quite do it that way. It then breaks into these sort of like Greek tragedy style chapters, or acts, where you play as Ellie for a long time. You're exploring Seattle. You're battling your way to all that stuff at the aquarium. Is heartbreaking. There's the whole side story with Dina. I thought the Dina Ellie stuff was beautifully done.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Gary's talking on his stream about. He was talking about the representation of LGBTQ plus QIA plus. I'm always getting these things a little bit, but I thought it was just a wonderful, realistic, I assume, representation of that sort of relationship. And there were just some really, and also Dina at no point's just the sort of girlfriend character or anything like that. She's every bit as sort of well-rounded. In fact, she's probably more well-rounded than Ellie, and in a lot of ways she's much more in tune with things. Ellie's obviously still struggling with a lot of stuff, and it was lovely. And there's these sort of moments where you think, oh, maybe Ellie could just maybe she could just live the happy life. And I just thought that was really nicely done. I thought Jessie was wonderful. I mean, the game's incredibly diverse, right? And it's been accused of tokenism and all that. But I was so pleased to see so many diverse characters. And yeah, I just thought it was wonderful. I think that whole first kind of chunk of the game in particular just felt wonderful. What were you guys' thoughts of that sort of stuff?
I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself here, but if I could break it down into just kind of very different sections rather than nitty gritties, I thought the first section of the game, keep wanting to call it a film, that's terrible. So up until Abby shows up at the theatre,
right? I mean, that's about halfway or so.
About halfway, I suppose. Yeah. Up until that point, I thought the game was phenomenal. And I was loving every single thing I did. I thought the story was turning just enough and giving me enough surprises to keep me on my toes. And there was a few moments where it really threw me a curveball at certain times. And I was just really enjoying it. I was really liking Ellie. Again, I was really liking the Dina and Ellie stuff. I thought, even though it was very wash, rinse, repeat of, you go here, you get through waves of enemies, then you end up at your location, as the first game was as well. But I thought it was...
It was a bit less kill boxy, though. It's less kill boxy than... I
felt that the carrot that was dangling in front of me was sweeter than the first one. I still wanted to go, very much so. And then you took over as Ellie, and I've got Abby, and I've got a real problem with it. Because it's like you say. Do you know what I mean? You play the baddie. And I'm a bit like, and I know they're probably going for the, one man's terrorist, another man's freedom fighter, and all that kind of thing. And it was just, they spent the whole first game getting you really solid on Joel and Ellie, and that was it. And Joel does the wrong thing for the greater good at the end of the first one. He does the wrong thing, but you're with him, and you go, yes, you did the right thing because you're saving that one human, and that's more important, and you're with him. And then in the second game, you play as Joel to save Abby. So you save the baddie, who then brutally kills you, and the game wants you to control that character and start to feel for them, start to like them, and I had a real problem with it. And it got to the point where I was a wee bit like, I don't want you to endear me. You know, she was doing the whole kind of throwaway comments when she was looking for things and all that, and I was just like, I don't want to be endeared by you because you're the baddie.
But I think that's the whole point of the game. There's nobody that's the baddie in her world. It's the same thing with something like The Walking Dead. You know, the saviors and Negan and all that. It's Rick's team that are the baddies in their world. There's no goodies and baddies in this sort of world. Joel killed humanity.
Oh, we didn't, and we're going to talk about that because
But
you can't, from one brain, you cannot save the world. Oh.
Well, we don't.
But there's
know.
no such
We
thing
don't
as
know.
No, you do,
zombies
because the
either,
biologist who lives downstairs told me.
Yeah, but he also knows that this sort of fungal infection wouldn't have taken over the whole world as well, right? He does know it's a video game.
Well, he doesn't know the ins and outs, but I did ask him if you had the biopsy of one brain,
I think
would
we
you be
need
able to
focus on
No, you can't. You
the
can't
rules
suddenly
of the
go,
game
oh,
world.
the realism has got. No, you can't because it's based in fact, and then they manipulate it. But,
but the other thing to remember is that that might well be a biological fact, but what they do know is that if they could harvest the parasite from Ellie's brain, then they would know a lot more about the virus than they do otherwise. So there was still a reason. There was still a reason to do it.
I think the base point of this, though, is it's a video game. And
Yeah.
it is a dramatic storytelling. Therefore, you have to suspend your disbelief that,
Yeah.
that
Never
she
suspend
could
my
cure
disbelief.
humanity. But if that's the case, it's a drama and it's a video game, and there's a goodie and there's a baddie. There's evil and there's good.
But there was evil and good. There was evil, lots of evil characters, and lots of good characters did evil things as well. That's what it is. This is not, the wonderful phrase that was talked about with black and white cinema, and what they said is there's no such thing as black and white. It's all shades of grey, and that's what it is. This world is a brutal world. The wolves do good things and terrible things. The Seraphites do good things and terrible things. Jackton, Joel's group, Tommy's group do good things and terrible things. It's a thing about survival. And I was the same. I was borderline furious when I had to play as Abby. That's better only be 10 minutes because I'm going to be raging. And I really bonded with her over time because she's every bit as broken and damaged as Ellie is, and she's had a horrible life. To have seen that, to have found your father's body, to have thought that
He would have a limp. He would have a limp. That's all that was wrong with him.
Well, I saw that, right? I saw you do that in the game, and I just shook my head, Paolo. I was like, what a cop-out. Paolo, you absolute...
He didn't need to die. That's what I'm saying. Joel's the goodie. He didn't need to die. Shoot him in the leg, take Ellie away. Job's done. Nobody's dead.
But that's not the case, because you see what happened. If you leave survivors, people come after her. That's why he killed them. That's why he killed them all. Because that's what he says to Marlene, basically. She says, you don't have to kill me, leave me live. He says, you're only going to come after her. That's why he killed them. That's why he killed them all. So you shooting him in the leg was just as well that he bled out, because that was a cop-out, Paolo, and you'd have got him killed much quicker, and you'd have got Ellie killed as well. So you hang your head in disgrace. I thought the Abby stuff was really interesting, and there's that moment where everything's looking like it's getting there. Everything's looking like it might happen. There's the horrible moment when Ellie kills Owen and what's her name? The girl with the Mel, who's pregnant. That was horrific, and you really felt a moment there where Ellie suddenly started to really realise the gravity of everything and the Dina thing and all that. And the whole way through it, I was like, something's going to happen to Dina. And then they get back to the theatre, and you're sort of wondering, you're like, maybe Ellie is going to go home right now. Maybe we can get out of this. And then that noise happens. They hear Tommy shouting. They run through the door. Jesse got killed. It devastated me.
Aye, that really caught me off guard. Aye.
And then there's Abby standing there with a gun, and she looks distraught, and she says, you killed all my friends. And then she said, we let you live. And she did. She killed Joel, and I would never forgive her for that. And even as we get towards the end of the game, I still, as Ellie, because I was playing it in a role, I still, as Ellie, wanted to kill Abby. But
no, I'd stopped by that point.
But I wasn't happy about it. I was like, oh, I don't know. I still don't feel okay with this. I had really bonded with Abby. I thought the whole Abby and Lev story in particular, and Lev's sister as well. I can't remember Lev's sister's name.
Yara.
Yara. Was just wonderful, and it all brings in that sort of babies aren't born racist or homophobic. Babies aren't born with hatred in their heart. It's a learned behavior, and these people are made to think that those folk are dangerous. Those folk need to be killed or they'll kill us, and that world becomes that. So all of these characters are products of that world, and as a result, it's difficult to. I think you've got to be careful not to try and judge them by our moral code, because I think the moral code, there's a morality through the film, and I've said it now, the game that ponders all these questions, but this is a brutal world where it's kill or be killed. And I really started to bond with Abby, and it'll be interesting to see how you're going to feel with it in a couple of days, Paul.
Yeah.
It might still be a bit raw to you.
But it's just it really. I'm not going to hark on about it because I know it's different views and all that jazz. But it's simple wee devices that like when Joel helps Abby, when he saves her near the beginning, he's not threatened by it. He doesn't see it as a danger. Mm-hmm. He helps her, and they're going to invite them back to Jackson because they want to welcome. They're obviously cautious because it is that kind of world, but they want society and humanity to be thriving again. Whereas the wolves are not like that. The wolves are very militant, and this is us and that's them. And to me, that's just a device to go, you're the baddie and you're the goodies.
Who do you think were the goodies?
The Jackson tribe.
All right, aye. Well, but again, that's a Walking Dead sort of thing. That's what I'm saying. That's because they're our group.
But what I'm saying is the story paints it so that the Jackson people are welcoming. Who's that at the gate? I'll let them in, kind of thing. Whereas the wolves are very much.
That's still a point of view thing. The Jackson people are welcoming to Ellie and all that, but the wolves aren't. Joel and Tommy helped one woman who was running from the infected, and in that sort of moment, the sort of rules of the world, the rules of survival is that the infected don't care if you're a Scar or a wolf or you're from Jackson or you're a Firefly or anything. It's the living versus the dead, and therefore Tommy and why would Tommy? Abby's got basically no weapons at that point. Why would Tommy and Joel be afraid of Abby at that moment?
Because she's a stranger.
But they outnumber her. They outnumber her. They've got the weapons, and they saved her at that moment.
Why would they save her? Why would they take her in? They save her and then want to take her back to Jackson. Exactly, they're the good people.
But we later on see Abby do good things as well. She had no reason to help Yara.
But Abby goes back for
Abby
Yara
and the wolves.
Abby goes back to Yara and Lev, and it's an odd thing. Do you know what I mean? She's like, I don't know why I'm doing this, and I get what you're saying, and it's about Abby turning around and realizing that she's not the baddie. If that makes sense. But it's an odd thing for her to go back and help them. Whereas it wouldn't be an odd thing for Joel and Ellie to go and help them.
But the other thing is that Joel and Ellie haven't grown up in a military. The wolves are a military operation, basically. That's the way they think. They think like an army, and they are at war. The Jackson people we know are they've got a little pub and a ranch and all that. They're not at war. There's a slightly different perspective.
The wolves have a history of violence. So if you look at the wolves and all the notes that Ellie finds, which weren't written by Ellie, they're written by people who went through the wolves' experience. The wolves as a group, like
they're brutal, absolutely.
They weren't happy with, or what were they called? The people, the government people.
Fedra.
And then they revolted against Fedra, and then they became worse than Fedra. And you find all those notes about them shooting people and dragging them to dragging them to the stadium, and I remember the bitterness of them trying to imitate the start of Jackson. So remember when you get Jackson and you go to walk around and you saw the school and you saw the notice board and you saw the community, and it's like, oh, it's lovely. And they tried to do that with the stadium, and in my head I'm like, but this is false, because these people were forced to come here. Who says that they're happy being here? Like, Jackson chose to be there. Abby grew up as a wolf, but Abby starts questioning the wolves. That's why she eventually goes back. So the wolves are if you're looking at the two, and we're going to ignore Scars because yours is weird. If we're looking at the two groups of people,
two factions,
you would say, on a moralistic scale, Jackson is a better faction than the wolves, because the wolves rule through fear and power and pain and suffering, and they force people to their will, whereas Jackson's out as more of a, we're a community. And Abby starts to see that, and the world, you never, when you find notes about people wanting to leave Jackson let them go. If you were trying to leave the wolves, it would be like, no, get into that stable and play with that dog until you're dead. Like, I think the inconsistent storytelling is, like, for me, there was bits where I just do this a lot, particularly in the second half. And if you, like, looking back at the stream, it's funny because you watch, I was very much like Paul, when you start as Abby, and I'm like, and I huff and I puff for about 3 hours. But then as Abby starts to change, I kind of soften. And then by the end, I really couldn't stand Ellie. And it feels like a waste. Like you say, she does that, we let you live. And then she lets her live again, and she says, and if I ever see you, I'm going to kill you. Or if don't, does she even say that? She says, or does she? If I ever see you,
don't see you again.
Yeah. And then you think Elliot and Joel spent, what, 4 years together, and Jackson, is it 4 years between games? And they had that father-daughter relationship building. All Joel tried to do in the first game was teach Elliot to do good. And Joel's a bad guy who does good things, or he's a good guy who does bad things. And you can see he made a change in his life. So, and you can tell he's trying to instill in Ellie goodness and letting go of grudges and da. So when Ellie goes after Joe's killer, you get it. You get the revenge thing. And then she misses her chance, and she says, right, I've had enough. And Abby comes, and Abby lets her live again after smacking her down. To me, Ellie, that should have been where Ellie goes, do you know what? I need to let go of this hate. Joel wouldn't want me to be pursuing this. I've been battered twice. My girlfriend's got a baby. Then she has that nice house. And then I just don't get the constant, that whole last bit. It just feels like it goes against everything Ellie would have been taught by Joel, and she never learned through experiences, which isn't like Ellie. Ellie learns through experiences, and it just felt like it was, and now we're going to do this. And to go back to your thing about it being bold, I feel like it was trying to be too bold, and it was trying to be so non-pandery. It went the opposite, to be like to people, well, this is what Ellie's doing now. Get it, Rinya. I just felt it was like.
No, well, I have to disagree. I think
by the end, I was like, Ellie, you are not a character I recognise. I was just like, I don't even like who you are.
At the farm, where the baby, and it's glorious, and you have this little moment where you're like, oh, wouldn't it be lovely if they could live happily ever after? But I just felt, Ellie can't let this go. I can't let this go. I can't let this go. She killed Joel. I promised Tommy I was going to do this. Tommy definitely can't let it go. I need to finish this. I fully understood why Ellie had to, and I fully understood it happening. It was almost like a sort of suicide mission for Ellie, because I actually didn't think Ellie was going to necessarily be able to kill Abby. I
don't think Ellie should have survived. See, with that end bit when she turns up at the house, that's when I threw my control. You see me throw my control pad on the table, and I'm like, oh, we're just in Fantasyland. I was like, it's just, I just feel like that whole last bit, I was like, what is this hot mess? And that was the third game. So to me, like, I would have loved a game, and was it Santa Barbara they're in?
Yeah.
I would have loved a game of a whole new community against those Rattler people, and that really, different dynamic and different environment. That was a whole new game. But they didn't need that with the characters that were established. It was just
No, I don't know. I mean, I genuinely, I liked it. As I said, my one thing was it did feel like it was going on and on, but I did really like the Rattler stuff. I liked all that. I just knew I had a moment where I sort of thought this is real endgame spoilers when you heard that Abby had been taken down to the beach because she tried to escape and all. It's like, you know, I nearly swore again. I was like, oh man, we're going to get down here and Abby's already going to be dead. And there'll be no closure for Ellie. She won't get a chance to deal with this. And then this bloody fight happens, and I literally was just heart in my mouth the whole time. I was like, I don't know who I want to win this fight.
I wanted Abby to win. I was like, Abby, drown her. Just drown her. Also, she'd been stabbed by that tree. She should have sepsis. I was just like, bro, Fantasyland. I was, you see me. If you watch that bit of the stream, it is I'm quite funny because I'm just like, oh my god, what is it? And Daybreak's chatting away in the comments, and I'm just like, I hate this lassie. Just drown her. You just drown her, Abby.
Paolo, what were your thoughts of that sort of last section?
Do you know? Just listen to you talk. Actually, just I do want to answer your question. But it just suddenly dawned on me. I see if you lifted the whole Abby controlling section out, I think I wouldn't have missed it.
You are such a basic bitch.
I think I would have been quite happy, and I don't think it would have changed my feeling of the game if you lifted the whole Abby section out.
It would have changed the entire game, though.
So, like, do you mean you'd have played up until the end of the theatre and then just jumped to Santa Barbara?
No, Abby could attack me, and we have the fight in the theatre, and she still lets me go, and then there's the happy ending that's not a happy ending. And then you go and hunt her, and I don't think I'd feel any different about the game.
But it sounds like you were just looking for a very simplistic story. That it kind of just feels like all you wanted was The Last of Us 1 again.
No, because it's.
But that's what it would have been.
I don't care for Abby. I don't care because they spent the whole first half of the game making out she's a baddie, and I get it. You then meant to control her and go, oh, she's not actually that bad, but she is. And I get that she's turning around and all that, but I'm kind of half siding with Gary here. That I'm a wee bit like, do what you want. I don't care. I've just sworn now, haven't I? Yeah. I'm just a bit I
have to be. I'm so surprised, Paolo. I genuinely, I'm so surprised.
Don't get me wrong. I really enjoyed the game. I did enjoy it, and I loved the story. I did stop caring a wee bit, and it became just something I was watching. To answer your question though about your farm and all that, I loved all that section. I thought that was great, and I thought the climax of the one thing I will give it is that I do like stories that merge. So going back and playing the same time with Abby was interesting, and getting the pit stops that you'd already played, and things like meeting Nora, and Nora was there, and you're like, oh, you're in trouble, and all that kind of stuff. I like
that sniper sequence with Tommy's.
Yeah, that was great as well.
I'm so happy when that stupid Palagers get shot in the face. I actually cheer.
I quite liked him.
I hated him. He spat in Joel. I hated him I still hate him. I will always hate him. And when he gets his face popped, I was like, Growth!
but I do think that I did have I definitely did, especially towards the end, really relate to Abby, but never at the expense where Ellie wasn't my girl. You know, if the two of them were going into a fight, I did want Ellie to win. The bit where Tommy was the sniper, he's firing on Abby and
Manny.
I was like, oh man, I hope I don't have to kill Tommy here. I really hope I don't have to kill Tommy here. I definitely had my people. There still was an element of the goodies, but I loved the arc of Abby. I thought it was really interesting. I do think it's a nature versus nurture thing, and she starts to learn that the sort of indoctrination that the wolves had taught them about all sorts of things. They also, the interesting thing about Abby is, I think, because of what had happened to Abby, I think, and this is
What, our dad got shot in the knee?
Yeah. This is a constant, because basically what happened, because of you, Paolo, her dad died a horrible, agonizing death because of a systemic infection in his kneecap, and he just slowly rotted away in front of her. Because of that, Abby, and much like Ellie, this is the sort of revenge thing where these people think that once they get their pound of flesh, once they kill this person, the pain's going to go away, and it doesn't. It doesn't go away. It doesn't go away for Abby. It doesn't go away for Ellie. And that's the whole point of the game. And it's so interesting because it's something like, if you think of Breaking Bad, for instance, the Vince Gilligan, he said what he wanted to do with Breaking Bad was take Mr. Rogers and then turn him into Tony Montana, right? And as Breaking Bad progresses, you are meant to, and you do, but you're meant to, my wife hated Walter White from about the end of season 2, I think, or midway through season 2. I was with him to the end. I was just with him, even when he did terrible things. Because I kind of still understood that from his point of view, and that was the same with Abby. I was still angry at her. I still wish she hadn't killed Joel, but I still ultimately wanted Ellie to get her revenge, because also I think Abby was just so broken. But then towards the end, you actually start, because for the majority of the thing, I thought Abby's so broken, actually her being almost put down would probably be a favour to her. And if Ellie was to kill her, it would probably be the best of both worlds, because I saw some redemption for Ellie, and then it sort of flips it, and you see these little green shoots of a possible redemption for Abby, whereas Ellie goes darker, really darker into the revenge and the thirst for blood. And I just thought it was a really complex story, and it's not going to please everybody, but I just loved that whole element of it. And I honestly, the more I'm talking about it, the more I liked it.
I mean, I did, as I say, I did enjoy it. I didn't not enjoy it. I've just got personal creative problems with it. But I'm totally with you, Colin, in that I'm so glad they didn't pander, and they did go all out bananas. And there was times where I was, like at the farm, I was a bit like, if this finished, I'd be quite happy. I'd be quite happy if this finished and it was hollow and empty and we didn't get what we wanted, and that's the point. And that's how it did end. How it did end, because that's the point. Is revenge is never quenched, as you say. It's never done. No matter what you do, it's never there. And I just feel, like Gary was saying, that last section was a wee bit redundant because she was already in that place before.
Yeah, but she was in that place, but she also went to the shed and heard the squeal of a pig and it became a gibbering mess because of PTSD. She wasn't better.
But murdering somebody's not going to get that. And in fact, if anything, having her, I'm guessing, wife, or soon-to-be wife, if they went up the Swanee, a baby, a life, she had the memories of Joe, she had the sketches. I think she's able to draw his eyes by, or maybe she still can't draw his eyes by that point. And then I think it's so whole, because she goes back to that farm. She's I expected to see like a far off shot of her and a rope in a tree, because she didn't have a life. She has no life. She's got a big scar on her belly. I don't know how she survived that. She must have found that other surgeon in the ocean somewhere. And then the one thing that Joe left her is gone. So she has nothing. She has no revenge. She has nothing to remember Joe by, because she can't even play that janky wee guitar. And I was just like, this game has been pointless for Ellie's character development. For me, and I get you say it was, but I'm just like, it never had to be that way. She should have learned.
But
and
I mean,
people in her life should have been able to teach her.
if we're going to, you know, it's a wee bit twee, but I imagine this is what it was. Is that her going there and, you know, her things are there and she gets the guitar, she tries the guitar, and her leaving the guitar is essentially postering that I'm leaving Joel behind now and I'm going on my way. That, to me,
she's not going to last long with half a horn and
Gary, you're right, it is pointless, but that again is the point. Revenge is pointless. That's the whole point of the she gained nothing from her quest.
It just felt so different for the Ellie moon, and I was like, I don't get. It's almost like they were like, you pure love these characters. Well, we're just gonna rip them to shreds. Because by the end, I hate her. Like at the end, I throw my control pad in the stream. I'm like, well, hope you're happy, Ellie. Hope it was worth it. You should have drowned. You should have drowned in the ocean, and that should have bled out in the ocean in that rowboat. To even have to get back, you can see I am raging at her, like, and I'm like, Joel's up in heaven, looking down at you, like, you're a wee numpty, what you doing?
Oh, Joel's not in heaven though, mate.
Joel's looking up for hell in his bungalow, like, what you doing, you poor numpty? Like, it's just, I was just like,
but you know what, Gary?
Numpty.
Do you not think it's better that you had that visceral a reaction to it rather than you just thought, it was alright?
No, because I think if it ended with her in the house being pure PTSD or not, but she had the support structure, it's more of the world and the elements can heal, whereas Ellie, it's that stupid post-apocalyptic thing where the world cannot heal, and I'm like, well, we've kind of seen that just now, actually, but I just think
people need
to sit right with me.
Help, though. That's the thing. People need to seek help, and the problem for Ellie was people who are struggling with mental illnesses don't always make the best choices. They don't always make good choices. You're right. It was a terrible choice to go to Santa Barbara. She should have stayed with Dina, but that's the I think everybody knew the second she walked away, you're like, this is not going to end well. This is a terrible choice. But that shouldn't be a criticism of the game.
Last of Us, Ellie would have thought differently. If it was Last of Us 1 Ellie, and her whole, like, she would have.
But Last of Us 1, Ellie's a little girl, not a broken woman who is grieving the loss of the only father she ever knew. Who is, you know, that's the you weren't going to get Last of Us 1 Ellie, and that's the same. All these folk that wanted the Last of Us 1, they wanted the happy father-daughter story. You were never going to get that. That's the thing. And that's what I said.
I just feel like her character development never made sense to me. Like, and you're never going to change my mind on that. I don't think it. I just don't see how it made sense in the end. And I was just like, well, you're an idiot. I don't even like you. Go drown in your boat.
Well, I mean, there's not much. I don't even know how. I mean, I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that the character development, it's not a happy character development, but it all seemed fairly natural. I think it's very easy for somebody to go down that route and end up making bad choice after bad choice. I don't think that's bad. That's writing. That's complex writing.
I have to side with Colin on this one. I think certainly along with everything else, the Joel incident changes Ellie and puts her down a different path to what we wanted her to go down. Yeah. And I think it's that my main issue with the whole Abby thing and all that is for storytelling, it needs to be somebody's story. It can't be multiple people's story. You need to have someone's story, one person's story. There can be sub-characters and all that jazz and subplots, but the journey has to be one person's story, and I think that's my gripe with it, is it's trying to tell two people's story.
The stories are mirrored. I think it's essentially one story. These two women's lives are actually not that different. Their arcs are not that different. They sort of meet at a point and then diverge. I think you're telling the one story through two vessels, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. You think about it, it's a sort of redemption story for one, and sort of like trip into Dante's Inferno, and they meet on the sort of apex. It's the same story.
I just think it needs to be one person's story, though. I mean, by all means, it can be mirrored, but we need to go on that journey with one person rather than two people going that way.
I don't know if I agree, because you think of films like No Country for Old Men. That tells multiple stories. That's a masterpiece. That's a complex story that's told from a number of. There's countless films that have those different perspectives. I disagree that you have to have one story. I realise that it's easier on the gamer, it's easier on the viewer if you're following one linear story, but I don't think that...
No, it doesn't need to be linear. It doesn't need to be linear, but the heart of the story needs to be one person's story. You can, as I say, you can have all these other stories going on, but the heart of it, the one, it's the person you go, I want to be that person. What would I do if I was in their shoes? As opposed,
you still get that. You start with Ellie and you end with Ellie, so it is still her.
But you're
story.
You're muddied because you're thrown Abby, and you're forced to go against Ellie.
Well, again, I think that well, I know that's by design, but I think that's a bold choice. I don't
disagree with that. I don't disagree with that.
Works for you or not? That's a subjective thing, but I don't think that's something you can criticize them for, because they purposely did that for a reason.
I totally agree with that, and I do think it is a design thing, and I think you're right. It's on me that I don't like it. It's not the right thing.
Yeah,
but I completely think that's what's happened to Gary. Is it's muddied his view of Ellie. That it just becomes you. But I meant, you were my hero, and now you're not my hero because I'm this other person who's against you, and I'm meant to be for them, but I'm also meant to be with you, and it just muddies it all, and you just get fed up.
I just loved all that. There was, as I said, there was an element where there was a bit to start with where I went, oh God, I hope I'm not with Abby for long, because I didn't like Abby at that point. The game is very good at painting people in a particular light, and then it is, and obviously it worked to greater or lesser effects. Well, actually, it sounds like the Abby storyline worked the same way for both me and Gary, that everything changed, and it kind of feels like you sort of dug your heels in a wee bit.
I did, without a doubt, I did. It was... I do genuinely remember consciously going, I don't want to like you.
An absolute huff.
Yeah. See,
I'm not doing it. I don't want to play with her.
The bit you end up with Mel and Manny in the greenhouse and having banter. I was like, I don't care about your banter. I don't want to banter with you. You're gonna get stabbed. Just get off the screen. Like, but you do see me change towards Abby. I do think though Abby's story was very twee and it was very forced at times with the parables they drew. Giraffes and zebras. There was so many things that Ellie happened that Abby just happened to do as well, just a wee bit differently. And I was like, oh come on guys, I was like laying it on a bit thick here, aren't we? And I think the I made a note. Abby's redemption from the wolves in 3 days was a bit extreme. I mean, how did that Lev and Yara thing? I was like, right, hold on a minute, right? What's like what? It all just Abby.
But I mean, that ties in with kind of born again.
That thing fell apart for me.
That ties in with that born again Christian kind of thing of, oh, I've suddenly found Jesus or whatever. She'd found herself, maybe, I don't know. Or that night in the boat with Owen just awoke our eyes to Garrett and Thingy's Levi's. That night in the boat with Owen awoke a lot of people, Gary.
Oh my God. That was me and it was just me and Daybreak on the stream. And I was like, oh, oh my God. And then I was like,
So there's a fairly
nasty.
It's not particularly graphic. It's quite robust sex scene, which was a wee bit of a surprise. I could tell that it felt a more grown-up game than even the first one.
Yes,
They were addressing things. I always find sex in video games really uncomfortable. I just don't. I always feel weird about it. I didn't actually.
It's like that should have been a Fade to Black moment. Oh my!
I actually liked that, but I thought it was well handled and it seemed right. And it didn't feel gratuitous. It felt an honest moment. So it didn't.
It worked, but it was just so unexpected, especially.
Well, it was unexpected, but again, I think it was sort of unexpected for the characters and everything. I think that was I thought it was a really nice sort of moment, but it's one of those things like, in the horror movies where people have sex and you're like, oh, that's you're going to die now, and you had that feeling, didn't you? We already knew that Owen was going to die, but you kind of felt like that sort of sealed the fate.
I really liked what kept me going through Abby's section was I was curious as to what was going to happen when we got to the point in the theatre.
Yeah, it was a lovely moment to break it.
Yeah, and the friend of the podcast, Dancing Toaster, put his foot in it when he was telling me, it's out of the blue, he said, oh, Last of Us 2 is brilliant, I've just got to the island. And I was like, I'm not at an island yet, mate.
Oh.
So, even playing through Abby and she hadn't got to the island yet, the mind was racing. I was going, all right, so are they going to end up teaming up and going against the Scars and all that?
I thought that.
Do you know what I mean? So I was intrigued by that. I was like, what's going to come of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because it wasn't something that's what let me down with it.
Yeah,
but it was really nice to think what was going to happen, and I had no idea what was going to happen from that point forward, and that was exciting.
So I had that moment as well where I thought, imagine what happens is the Seraphites attack the theatre.
That's what I thought was going to happen.
And Abby and Ellie have to kill the Seraphites themselves, and they work together.
I thought it was going to be Girl Pubber, besties for life, and then it wasn't.
Tell me this honestly, right? So we all had varying ideas that might have happened. Do you not think you'd have been a wee bit disappointed if that did happen because you saw it coming? Does that not make it more interesting storytelling that it didn't happen that way?
I agree. I don't think I'd be disappointed because I guessed it. But I much prefer the fact that right up until the end, Ellie and Abby were up against each other, and baddie goody, however way you look at it. Them teaming up and becoming best of friends, I don't know if I'd ever be happy with.
Yeah, and I think that would have been really false because I genuinely, I think there was maybe by the end of it, and we'd seen that Abby's real gripe until all her friends got killed was only ever really with Joel.
She didn't even really was. That's the thing.
No, that was the thing. So I could potentially have seen Abby maybe letting it go, not after all her.
She did twice.
Well, I know exactly, but
3 times after she got off that.
I don't think there was ever any chance of Ellie letting it go. At least not until right at the end when it did feel the right, and I was sort of relieved. I wasn't happy, and I was heartbroken, and I felt hollow, but in the right sort of way because it's like I'm so glad that Ellie didn't kill Abby because I don't think she would have been able. I don't think she would have got the release or the. I don't think she'd have found what she was looking for by killing Abby. I don't think.
That's how much Abby drowned on.
And then maybe actually Ellie almost would have been better served being killed by Abby, but I'd have been devastated. And I think that would have flipped my feelings on Abby if that had happened.
If anything, I would have been more like, she's at rest.
I was pretty sure with
a wee menace to yourself.
Abby driving away in the boat and that lovely shot of Ellie in the water with just the sea in front of her. I thought, that's it. She's at peace. She's dying. Her and Joel can go up to heaven and be happy. I thought that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'd fall for the fake Abby.
Yes. With the hair. Yes.
I don't know. I was like, I'm looking at her. Why am I not doing anything? And then I turned around and was like, oh, she's there. Hi.
Yes, I did the same.
She's right in the middle of the.
She's got that haircut as well. I didn't expect her to have the Captain Marvel haircut.
Like 4 weeks. I was like, I'm amazed you're alive.
But then we know how. I mean, Abby is tough as old boots.
But how long was she with the Rattlers?
Well, she'd been caught by it a month ago.
Like, because she was visibly smaller.
Scrawny,
do you know what I mean?
Because I like the fact that Ellie took out the guy who caught Abby.
Yep.
Yeah. I like that. That like when she was upside down, that scene was good. I was kind of like, oh yes. And then I went back to disliking her like after she got free.
So, let me move away from story for a little bit. One thing I would like to talk about, I thought the combat, I thought the enemy AI was unbelievable at points. I thought the combat was brutal, horrifically brutal. And there's a moment when you're in Seattle and I was fighting, and it's tough, even on medium, it's really tough, the fighting. And I was sniping folk with bows and arrows and stuff like that, and they were shouting, she's up the stairs, and I was like, oh no, they're coming for me, and I ran and hid under a table, right, and I under a bed, and I was like, I'll be fine, and I'm going to sneak out under here, and I'm going to grab this guy, right, and he's in the room and he's wandering, but I can watch his feet, and I'm like creeping along the floor, and I was like, I'm going to come out here and I'm going to shove him in the back. He grabbed me and pulled me out from under the bed, and I got the fright of my life and the most brutal, like screaming at the TV. That sort of horrific violence that The Last of Us does so well, that absolute fight or flight moment. And it just felt so visceral. And I know Bride2208 is not enjoying it. And I was a wee bit like, I was almost just having to say to him, I think you've just got to get good. I don't really know what else. He was really complaining about the combat and how much he disliked it. But Bry himself, and he'll admit this, he tells me all the time that he's rubbish at games. He says that's his sort of quote. Mm-hmm. This doesn't feel like the sort of game that you can really... This game has a level of difficulty to it. And he put the difficulty down. He said it was too easy. I loved the challenge of the combat. Did you play the whole thing on hard, Paolo?
I did.
How was it on hard?
It was tricky. There was a couple of really tricky parts. I would say over the last week or so. So from, when would it be? Maybe about from the uncomfortable sex scene. Maybe from then onwards, I utilised the running away tactic quite a lot.
Okay.
But even then, it was still brutally hard to run away. And what I liked about it was most of them you couldn't just run away, so you'd find out where you need to go a couple of times, a couple of deaths. It wasn't just a case of getting there quickly. You probably had to take out still 3 or 4 guys before getting there, even though you're running away.
One person at the cutscene door.
Exactly, yes.
It was much less kill boxy than anything Naughty Dog's done before.
Yeah, I found it very hard to predict patterns. I don't know if that was the difficulty or whether that's just the general combat.
I think that's an AI thing, because I don't think they really have patterns, because even on...
No, my guys were patterns that they're not.
I could see a few. But when there was, more than 6 people, I was in trouble. I was like, I can't keep up with where these people are. I'm just going to have to go for one.
But you should be. That's a good thing, I think. Because I don't think at any point you should really be thinking, this is easy, this bit. I'm going to have no bother against these guys. What were your thoughts on the combat, Gary? Sorry.
No.
I like the combat. I think we were discussing it once. Some bits I was pure amazing with the combat. That bit where you're going for the boat and the mall. I was like James Bond with my silenced handgun, and like I was really good. I did that bit twice. I did it off stream and on stream, and I was really good with the combat. But then sometimes the combat, I was saying like, and I was like, oh my god, I'm poor wobbling everywhere. I didn't think the AI was anything special. And I mean, like I always, whenever you've said before about the AI, and I think the last time you said, I was like, really? And again, I was literally pattern watching and scooting around them, or pattern watching for them to take a stealth kill with. Yeah. I never, like, I mean, when you're in like siege combat and they're coming for you, the shouting and stuff was good, and that was a bit more unpredictable. But I found 9 times out of 10, I was kind of able to do the 8 steps to the left, they're going to look behind them, 9 steps to the right, look behind them, back to where they were, look behind them. What?
I maybe just never really watched them for that amount of time. I was, and I didn't do any running away. I killed everybody. I
either killed everyone or stealth. And by the time I get to the island, I was bored of combat. So I did one fight, and then I managed to sneak around all the rest of them at the end of the island, because I was done by combat at that point. I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore.
The island felt a wee bit. I actually thought the island was a wee bit that was possibly a little bit rushed. I think they could have possibly condensed a little bit of the run up to the island and then given us a little bit more on the island, because it felt so different from the rest of the game.
One of my most favourite scenes though is the leader of the wolves and Yara.
Yeah, that was good.
Oh my goodness, so good.
That was good.
there's a really interesting bit in the game that a lot of people have really liked, where the Last of Us 2 almost, and this will potentially trigger Gary a wee bit and annoy him. The Last of Us 2 near enough out Resident Evil's Resident Evil. There's a section in the hospital that's very Resident Evil.
That bit was amazing. That was totally my gig. I was like, see if the game was more like that. Yeah.
It's sensational. It's like a mini game in between. And
the build up to it is so well done.
So atmospheric, so scary. And that boss was horrific.
Oh my days.
It kicked my ass so many times. I don't know how you did that bit on hard, Paolo. I was like, I actually turned to my wife at that point and said, Paolo's going to have to turn the difficulty down at this bit if he can even walk through this curtain, because his heart will be a twitching.
It was interesting because Baker Boy was watching at that point, and I finished and went, oh, you died much less than expected. I died so many more times at that. And I was like, you got to watch for the pattern.
I did not. See, I never think of games in patterns. So I don't really. And I didn't have a lot of. I just felt like the whole game was scrambling for ammo.
I had loads of ammo.
No, I was always nearly empty, and I loved it.
But I loved it.
I'd expect that in hard, but in normal, I was I always had a full clip, and then what was ever in the barrel, and then like I don't think I was ever. But I was like, oh my god, I've no ammo.
Oh no, I was always sitting about 3 or 4.
There's a great moment in the game as well. This is scripted, but how many of us jumped when you went to that crafting table and got grabbed in that apartment?
I think you're from Wolf, and I was like, and then did any get the last guy? He's like, please don't kill me. So I was like, fine, and then he pure tried to stab me. I was like,
oh, I killed him.
No, I didn't get that because I killed him.
I killed him, mate.
I went to be lenient because I was like, Ellie's not all about murder.
As I said, I was playing it. I played this game in role. I played this game as an avenging angel, as Ellie. I killed everything that came in my path, and very much the same with Abby. I played them both as sort of instruments of brutality or whatever. I just that was sort of the way I played the game. So it was interesting to then have that sort of conflict arise of, well, maybe I don't have to be killing all these people, but you're like, well, they shot at me, so I'm going to bloody kill them, you know?
I do think sometimes they signposted what was going to happen. There's a few points I called out what was going to happen, like when you fall through the floor of the arcade and there's a bloater.
Right.
Like in the build, I'm like, oh, we're going to push this. Like, oh, we're going to fall through the floor and there's going to be a bloater beneath us. And it was, and I was like, I should break this game.
I think we need to have a quick mention. We're time's marching on, but a little mention for the Shamblers.
The Shamblers.
The audience did not enjoy those. The audience were freaking at those during the streams. They were screaming in the comments. No one enjoyed those.
And the Stalkers.
Well, I knew you wouldn't like the Stalkers.
I don't like the Stalkers. Scramblers, yes, I give you. Horrible, scary. The noise of the Scramblers.
The Shamblers, yeah.
The Shamblers. But when you're first introduced to that Stalker, I was out.
Were the Stalkers in the first game?
No.
Right. See, I remember going, she was like, oh no, Stalkers. And I was like, Stalkers? And I was like, do I know what a Stalker is? And then someone was like, oh yeah, they were in the first game. I was like,
no.
Were they?
No.
So basically,
I was fine with the Stalkers. I just
is the infection over time has mutated, and as a result, there's new types of infected.
Yeah.
So
did you find the note talk about the thing? It's maybe because of the wateriness of the city.
Yeah. So they potentially do know. They're aware of Shamblers. The Shamblers are a part of the world, but we've never encountered them before. And as you said, it might just be because of that particular part of the world. The I don't know, the sort of the geology of that particular area or whatever makes different infections. But I just thought it was really interesting. It was nice to have to make the infected scary. Again,
I don't feel they used the Horde as much as they should have.
No.
Oh, the Horde scenes were great. I wish there was more of those.
I was surprised there wasn't more, because there was the first one with Abby, and then
which
there was
quite something.
Yeah, and then the Joel and Abby. When you save Abby, that's a Horde, isn't it?
God,
That's-
I died.
It's the same kind of scene, essentially, isn't it?
kind of links in together, doesn't it?
Aye.
Yeah, it's the
But
same horde.
that was
but
it,
yeah.
really, wasn't it? There was no other use of the horde that I noticed.
I guess that's because Seattle is a more populous place. There's two rival gangs. I guess the levels of
They're cleaning
infected
them out,
are being
aye.
sort of like pest controlled almost, and that's why it's only really elements of the lower levels of the hospital or the sort of
Oh, my days.
railroady bits where
Or that hotel. Oh, and those things in the wall. I screamed
that
quite
hotel
often.
is
I
a
screamed quite
wonderful
often.
moment as well.
The hotel was excellent. I liked the hotel, but
Is that
was
the one you're going down and down and down?
yeah.
Yeah.
Can I also
Um,
say how horrific is that? Astonishingly, I mean that gave me vertigo. That
Sky bridge.
the sky bridges.
Yeah.
Oh my!
I don't mind
was
it.
well
So
done.
even I was like, oh.
That was well
Oh.
done.
I was like, oh, thank God for that conveniently placed pool with very clean water suddenly.
Is there anything else major that we've missed?
Do you know what? There's a nice moment for me. We were talking about representation in the podcast earlier, and also we've got the LGBTQI stuff, like the relationship between Abby and Dina. But when you find the LGBT bookshop,
Yes.
and it's got all the smutty books in it, but then it has the Stonewall Riots history book, and it's
Hang on, maybe I didn't find
Oh, I don't think I did find that.
Ellie
Oh,
and Dina find it, and they're like, "Oh, saucy! This is a book for you." And they've got the pride flag, and they've got the trans flag, and
Oh
we
man, I
watched
think I
that,
missed that.
and I was like, they won't know that that's their flag, the pride flag, and I was like, and that's like, and a place that belongs to them, and then there's a bunch of infected in the corridor that scare you. But like it's a really nice. It's when you're trying to get to the hospital. No, because Dina's there.
It's probably a similar sort of place to the record store and all that.
Yeah.
There's when all the wee shops and there's some of the wolves are kind of patrolling. It must be before you get to the theatre, just into that build up, and it's just a really nice wee moment, and there's lots to look at in it and stuff. But I thought I really liked that. That was really nice.
I love that. I didn't come across that, and I feel sad that I didn't. The later half of the game, I had to kind of push right through, and I definitely stopped looking for things. But simple things like the record shop and how you might not have went in there and not had that song.
Yeah,
I feel like somebody's missed out in that if they've not done it. And likewise with your shop there. I feel like I've missed out. You know?
I'm not convinced there was quite as much of that stuff in the latter half. In the
I
sort
can
of
imagine.
in the Abbey half, there's not quite as much of that, but in the Ellie stuff, there's obviously bits of Seattle that I missed. I actually thought I'd done quite well, but
I felt I did everything. Gosh,
there are a couple of moments in the game where you sort of go through gates of no return and you don't actually know that you've done it, but also
cutscene door.
I think that's a good thing because actually
makes you want to go back.
Well, yeah, but it also means that it doesn't feel as much like a game like, oh well, I'm going to 100% this area before I move on.
Yeah.
You know, it feels more of an organic experience, and every sort of action's got a consequence. So I'm almost certainly going to replay the game. I'm toying with the idea of streaming it on Survivor mode or Survivor Plus, or whatever it is, the kind of hard. I think it's near enough one-shot kills. So it'll be difficult, but I would quite like to revisit it because there's already bits of the game that I know I'll have forgotten about. And by the sound of things, there's bits I've missed as well. There's a bit, and it was only, it was like a safe or something that I watched some of Gary's stream, and I went, oh man, there's a bit where I went through that door and I fell through the floor, but Gary didn't go through that door first and got all these supplies that I never got. I was like, I'm raging.
You as well at the start. I get lost in the snowstorm and she came and found me, but you found her.
Yeah,
when you're on horseback. I remember you being like, "Oh my god,
I was really surprised. I was really surprised.
I was lost in that snowstorm. I was like,
it's almost white out, and I'm like, I can't find Dina, and Ellie's shouting for her, and you can just hear this sort of voice somewhere, but you're not really sure. And then I was watching Gary, but I was watching him on a stream in a delay, and I didn't really want a backseat game, but it's like, he's gone completely the wrong direction here. He's not going to find her. I eventually found her, and when I did, it was such a relief. I was like, I found her, and she was sort of waiting for me, and she was like, oh, Ellie, thank goodness you're here. Dina came and found Gary, and I was like, I was like, that was really cool. really cool. It's probably not that difficult a thing to do in the game realistically, but I was just so impressed with it. Yeah, I just really like the game. You know, I mean, yeah, I think it probably is a wee bit long, but I'm loath to really. There's not really a particular moment that I feel they definitely could cut. And I can't help but feel if I play back again, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I would want them to cut this bit or not, knowing not everything I know now, because it almost feels like everything's kind of got a purpose. I loved exploring the aquarium and learning the sort of story of the family that lived there and finding all the drawings and all that sort of stuff. That felt an awful lot like that bit in the first one when after you escape the tank and you jump in the river and you find all about is it Itch or whatever he's called and
the community and the storm tunnels.
Yeah, it was that sort of world building, and I just loved it. I mean, maybe could have done without the Nerf bow challenge, but but
did you win it?
I did win it. Yeah,
Oh,
I did.
I didn't.
It was pretty close to be fair, but I did win it. And then so Abby forces Owen basically to put her name on the board, and you're like,
it's Ox.
Still does that when she loses.
Right.
Or she's. I get one less than the two of them, and it's still the same. No, you need to put it up there.
I guess there was just an added significance for me on the fact, and I don't think it necessarily changed that, but it was just an added significance because Abby was at the top of the tree. Abby was better than Mel, which I was like, whoa.
I couldn't find. There was two I couldn't find.
They're quite hard to find. I honestly, I got the last one with the skin of my teeth. Yeah. I mean, honestly, boys, I think we could talk about this for another 3 hours.
I don't know if I mentioned that I wasn't keen on the Abby bit.
Yeah, I went twice. And Gary hated Ellie by the end and wished she'd been drowned in the sand.
Yeah. I just went out in that boat.
I do hasten to add that, you know, as much as my gripes with the Abby section, I did enjoy playing the game. I loved playing the game, and I loved the story. The story was great, and I loved the revenge. I love a revenge story. I love westerns and all that. So the revenge story really appeals to me, and that hollow ending, that you know, you're never getting what you want, no matter what you do. I quite like yourself, Colin. I'm quite happy that's how it ends, and it's a hollow ending of a wanting ending, because that's what it needs for a revenge story. And you know, Last of Us 3.
Oh, they can get to.
I mean, I don't think there's going to be a Last of Us 3. I don't think so.
Do you know? I think
that it has to be in the world, but they just showcased there's so many stories that they could have done with Ellie, and that's why I'm like,
I don't think there's any more really to Ellie's story. I think Ellie's sort of learned now, finally.
Unless it's weaving a rope and got to the nearest tree, then that's all Last of Us 3 would be for Ellie.
I mean, they would maybe... I mean, I think there's more stories to tell in that world, but I just don't know if Naughty Dog would do it. Naughty Dog do feel like the kind of company, I think, who actually probably have earned the right from Sony to just do a new IP and not be forced like potentially somebody like Ubisoft might say, where they're like, no, we want another Last of Us. I think Sony and Naughty Dog have that kind of reaction and that sort of relationship now where even if they were to come to them, I think Neil Druckmann and all that would say, I think we've told that story, but this is another story, another game which we want to play.
No, I'm not convinced. I think there's another part to come.
Well, what would it be?
I don't know, but I feel there's another chapter to Ellie's life.
Maybe.
That will round her out, because she's not rounded out. She's drifting now.
It would be nice to see Ellie as an older woman,
Could be something like that
in her 50s or even 60s. But I mean, we're talking about Ubisoft. I mean, if any company were going to do it, where you play as an older woman in that sort of world in a sort of action game, then I suppose Naughty Dog are the kind of company that might do it. But I don't know. I kind of feel that we should let Ellie kind of
die.
We should let Ellie
drown. Live out. Hashtag not my Ellie.
Can't wait to see Gary and Reddit later on arguing. Gary, you'll be getting called. You'll be outed as an incel. Gary will be on Reddit screaming about SJWs. That was a joke. He won't be.
Absolutely not.
I hasten to add, I think Laura Bailey's performance was great. That was nothing to do with it. I'm not the one behind the hate mail and all that.
I think all the performances were absolutely
I think they were all brilliant.
sensational.
Yeah.
I thought the motion capture stuff was brilliant. I thought the face double stuff, because it was really interesting, because obviously there's a sort of body double for the mocap for Abby. There's an actor's face who's used, and there's Laura Bailey's voice, and the fact that they managed to bring all those constituent parts and make a real looking person, I was really staggered by the fact, and I thought also the way that both Abby and Ellie, but I was a wee bit more used to it because I know what Ellie looked like as a wee girl, and then in the run up to the game we saw various posters and trailers where we saw Ellie as an older woman. Well, I say older, she was like 1920. But what I really found interesting was watching the character of Abby, the model, grow and age. I thought it was really beautifully done.
Yeah.
And it's not just that suddenly she got jacked. It wasn't even just that. It was the face shape, just the. She aged. It was so beautifully done, and then I just thought that all the characters just seemed so interesting. I mean, we've not even really touched on Lev and Yara. I thought Lev was a really incredible story, and just a brilliant character, and another really interesting one. And it all comes down to that nature versus nurture thing. Lev was born to believe such and such about the wolves, and to be honest, most of what Lev had been told about the wolves was essentially true. But it didn't mean that just because somebody was a wolf that they were necessarily, and likewise. And it's also the constant thing of, although so Lev's trans, Lev's a trans man or boy. What age is Lev? About 14?
Yeah,
something like that. And gets dead named, and that's why Lev and Yara had to escape. Because obviously this sort of like fundamentalist group, the Seraphites, don't. Well, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, it basically Lev was going to be sort of pimped out and married to one of the elders and all that sort of stuff. And Lev wanted to be a warrior, and shaves his head, and that was a big no-no. And basically signed his death warrant, and essentially signed his sister's death warrant as well, because she had to. But it's really interesting because Lev still sort of defends the Seraphites the whole way through it. Don't call us scars.
It's interesting, that kind of indoctrination where you still believe, even though they've turned on you, you still believe in them, and you're like, oh.
And that's another one of those choices that I said, that people that are broken, people that are damaged, people that are hurt make bad choices. You're like, Lev, why are you going back to this island? Don't go back. Don't go back. You can never go back. You have to get as far away from here as possible. But he goes back, and I just thought it was wonderful, and I could just tell that all them terrible kind of gamer bros were just going to be getting triggered all over the place. Oh, she's a muscly woman and she beat up and killed my hero.
Yeah.
Oh, now they're forcing this trans agenda down our throats. Oh, look at all these. This guy's Asian. Oh, no, look at oh, now they're lesbians. There's this, there's that, and you could almost feel folk getting triggered all over. And I was like, good. I'm glad. I'm bloody glad, because if this is a problem for you, if that ruins your game, then you don't deserve to have nice stuff. You don't deserve to have complicated stuff. And I'm so glad that Naughty Dog, because I think lesser companies would have bottled it. I mean, we know fine well Ubisoft wouldn't have made this game. At least not the Ubisoft under the previous
regime.
Custodian. Yeah. I'm so glad that Naughty Dog did, and I'm so glad that they made bold choices. And yeah, by the sound of things, they didn't. We weren't all pleased with all of them, but I think it's.
Media's meant to do that, though.
Oh, exactly.
That's the point.
The bottom line, as you say, I would much rather they did this and did their bold strategy, and they really went for it. And it didn't quite sit right with me, but I still like it because I love the fact that it's a proper story and it's not pandered. It's not an easy route. I'd much rather it was that than that was alright, as you said.
Yeah, like it evokes an emotional response, and like you can enjoy something and still hate the outcome. Like it's, so the other week in the podcast when we were talking about all the hate that
Laura Bailey was getting.
Laura Bailey got, and I went to mention a comment, and I very quickly went, "Oh, someone said something about something," because I realised, Paul, you hadn't get to the point of the scene. So
okay.
So the scene in the boat, as I'm going to refer it to, a female had attacked her, Laura Bailey, in the comments saying, "Yeah, it was something along the lines of, and we know you only got the part because you and the director's name, whose name I forget, motion capped that scene together, and you did that for real." And she was like, "I never did a motion capture scene with him."
I saw that response,
and I was just like, what? And then a fun fact in the back of that, did you know that Abby's face model is just a random programmer at Naughty Dog?
I love that. There you go.
But yeah, right, how was...
I saw that response. I obviously had no reference to what it was, but I thought it must be something intimate.
Yeah.
To be attacked in that way.
I mean, so obviously, I don't know whether or not Ashley Johnson's getting as much grief. I think it's been pointed at mainly at Laura Bailey, but and Neil Druckmann. But I do see Jeffrey, what's his name that plays Tommy, great actor. Pierce. I can't remember off the top of my head. He's wonderful on Twitter. He does not give a. And everybody that comes after him is getting roasted. Roasted. It is magnificent. And yeah, I mean, listen, we dipped down. This is ludicrous. Laura Bailey's an incredible actor. Did a wonderful job. She didn't write the story. She just
morons. Morons, man.
She is not that person.
And do you know what? As Neil Druckmann said, I think Neil Druckmann, whether or not folk loved Joel and Elliot, of course they did. They loved the first game or whatever. Neil Druckmann has earned the right to tell the story he wanted to tell. I think he'd earned 100%. The right, and that's it. I mean, we're going on a tangent. How lovely is that bit, the Jurassic Park bit and the space shuttle and all that?
Oh, the space shuttle. The space shuttle.
Beautiful. I was teary.
That was a beautiful moment.
I was delighted that we did get to spend some time with Joel.
The flashbacks were a nice touch. I thought the flashbacks were very clever. Also nice with tutorials at bits.
Yeah, but I also it was just nice to know that these last 4 years with Ellie and Joel hadn't all been horrible and there had been moments. It was a complex relationship, and there was a problem. And that moment where he confesses to her as well, I'm so glad we had that moment. That was heartbreaking.
Oh my days! The last scene, their last exchange alive was beautiful as well. The very end of the game, you know what I mean?
Oh, at the after the dance.
On the porch with the coffee and all that. And I mean, it's beautiful writing. It's absolutely beautiful writing. And
incredible acting.
Yep.
It's funny.
And she threw her life away when Joel risked his for hers, the wee expletive. Drowned in the sea by Abby's hands.
Troy Baker obviously didn't have as much to do in this game as he did in the first one. But what a performance it is. And the game's not about his performance. It's really not. It's definitely not. It's about primarily Ashley Johnson and Laura Bailey and I can't remember her name that plays Dina. This is terrible. It's nobody come back to me. Particularly those three women's performances guide the whole thing, I think, and it was just I just thought it was wonderful, and actually, the more I'm talking about it, the more I liked it, and I genuinely think, I think it's probably a better game than the first one. All in.
It's tricky.
Whether I loved Joel and Ellie, and I loved The Last of Us, but I just think it's I think it's a masterpiece, and yeah, I have little tweaks, but I think a masterpiece can still be ever so slightly flawed.
Of course.
You know,
my wife doesn't like it at all. She doesn't like the bleakness of it, so I found myself trying to explain why it was so bleak, and I just found myself always coming back to the fact that it is epic drama. Yeah. It's it's brutal drama. It's not a, I'm trying to think of an example. Oh gosh, it's not a Steven Spielberg film where it's very dramatic, but there's the odd quipped line and the odd quipped scene and things like that. It is relentlessly brutal, and it's relentless drama. And you reference Greek tragedy and things like that, and it's bordering on that. It is the themes are so great that they are.
The stakes are so high.
Yeah. Very well done.
Gary, any final thoughts?
Yeah, they should have drowned.
Unbelievable. I really shouldn't. That was my fault for throwing to him. I
was waiting on it as well. Did you see him? Will I wrap this up then?
Yes.
Anything left to say, boys?
I mean, I'll have 100 things. I mean, I've probably spoke more than anyone, unfortunately, but Kel's surprise. But there'll be 100 things I want to talk about the second that we finish this. But I just thought it was incredible. I don't know if I'm quite ready to jump back in again yet, but I just thought it was incredible.
Yeah. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening or watching if you're on Twitch. We'd love to hear what you thought about the game. Obviously, we don't want you going on our social media and just blasting out spoilers everywhere, so please keep it to yourself. You can email us or send us private messages. Here's how you can do it.
Reaching the Nearly Men is easier than ever. Search for the Nearly Men Video Games podcast on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or your preferred podcast player. We stream on Twitch. Follow Colin at Colin_NM. Follow Paul at Paul Kaczynski, all one word. Follow Gary at Blunderboy87. And let's get social on Facebook as The Nearly Men, Twitter and Instagram where we are at Nearly Men, or go old school and email us on info@thenearlymen.com. Need all that again? Links are on our website, thenearlymen.com. So what are you waiting for?
So please do get in touch. Let us know what you think of The Last of Us 2. I can't believe that's actually out and done and dusted. All goes so quickly. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Colin and Gary, anything to say?
Sorry, I was just saying I'm gutted that we'll never get to play The Last of Us 2 for the first time again.
But you'll get to play The Last of Us 3?
No.
In 6 years' time. Gary and Colin, thank you so much for hosting this with me.
Oh, thank you.
I'll
see you on the next podcast. Drop us a wee line on twitch.tv/thenearlymen. You can see us there all the time. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.